Before we begin, please subscribe and like this channel so you never miss a new true story. My stepson texted me 2 days after his mother's funeral. The board meets Thursday. It's better if you're not there. My name is Walter Grimes, 63 years old, and for 31 years I built Grimes and Holloway Logistics from a single leased truck into a company that moved freight across 11 states. I married Denise Holloway when her son Marcus was 11 years old. I never adopted him legally. She always said there was no rush. That paper didn't make a father, love did. But I raised that boy like my own blood. Taught him to drive a stick shift in the company parking lot. Paid for his business degree at Morehouse. Gave him a desk at 19 and a vice president title at 28 over men who'd been loading docks since before he was born. Denise passed in March. Pancreatic cancer, fast and cruel, 6 weeks from diagnosis to the funeral home. I held her hand every night in that hospital room while Marcus came and went. Always on his phone, always handling something downtown. I told myself grief does strange things to people. I told myself he'd come around. 2 days after we buried her, that text came through. I read it twice, sitting in my study, surrounded by 31 years of photographs. Marcus at his 8th grade graduation. Marcus at his wedding where I walked Denise down the aisle since her own father was gone. Marcus and me shaking hands the day I made him VP. I did not call him. I did not storm into that office. I put the phone face down on my desk, and I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, and I sat with it. See, I learned patience in this business a long time ago. You don't win a freight contract by yelling in a boardroom. You win it by knowing something the other man doesn't know yet. The next morning, I called my attorney, Rhonda Pierce, who'd handled Grimes and Holloway's legal work since 1998. I asked her one question. What does the company's founding documents actually say about ownership and succession? She told me she'd pull the file. I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear her say it back to me in plain English. No assumptions. Here's what most people in that family never understood, including, I suspect, Marcus himself. When Denise and I married, I never changed the ownership structure of the company I'd built alone, 6 years before I met her. She was my wife and my partner in every way that mattered, and I made her co-signer on plenty, gave her a seat on the board out of love and respect, but Grimes and Holloway was mine. Sole proprietor, then sole majority shareholder when we incorporated. Marcus had stock options I'd granted him as VP, real money, real equity, earned through years of work I was proud of. But voting control, the actual keys to the kingdom, those never left my hands. Denise knew this. She agreed with it. A company runs better with one clear head, she used to say. Marcus, it seemed, believed differently. He believed that with his mother gone, and me presumably too old and too broken with grief to fight, the board, 5 people he'd spent 18 months quietly cultivating with promotions and favors, would simply vote him in as CEO and vote me out the door. He wasn't entirely wrong about the board. 3 of the 5 owed their positions to him. But he'd forgotten, or never fully understood, that the board doesn't own the company. I did. I didn't call a lawyer to fight dirty. I didn't threaten anybody. I simply asked Rhonda to prepare the documentation confirming what had always been true. And I asked her to have it ready by Thursday morning. Then I did something Marcus never saw coming. I called Grimes and Holloway's largest client, a regional Walmart distribution contract worth 40% of our annual revenue. And I asked for a private lunch with their VP of supply chain, a woman named Carol Ibsen I'd known for 15 years. I didn't say a word against Marcus. I simply told her there were some internal transitions happening at the company, and I wanted her to hear directly from me, personally, that service would remain uninterrupted, and I remained fully engaged. Carol appreciated the call. She said so. That mattered more than Marcus knew. Thursday came. I put on my grey suit, The one I wore to Denise's funeral, actually, because something about it felt right. And I walked into that boardroom at 9 a.m. sharp, exactly as I had every Thursday for 3 decades. The silence was the loudest thing I ever heard in that room. Marcus stood at the head of the table where I usually sat. He had a PowerPoint pulled up already, something titled Grimes and Holloway, Next Generation Leadership. His face did something complicated when he saw me walk in. Surprise, then a flash of anger, then an attempt at composure that didn't quite land. "Walter," he said. "We texted." "I got the text," I said, and I sat down in my chair. Not his chair, mine. But I own 62% of this company, Marcus, and nobody voted me off this board. So I'm here. One of the newer directors, a young man named Josh Ferran that Marcus had brought on 8 months prior, looked between us like he was watching a tennis match. He desperately wished he could leave. Marcus tried to recover. He talked about modernizing leadership, about honoring his mother's legacy by stepping into his rightful place, about how the family had discussed this. I let him talk. I let him get 4-5 minutes into it, dressing up an ambush in the language of legacy and grief, using his own mother's death as a stage for a coup he'd clearly been planning before she'd even passed. Then I asked Rhonda to hand out the folders. Inside was a full ownership breakdown, notarized and dated, showing exactly what I've told you. My 62% controlling stake, unchanged since incorporation, confirmed in writing by Denise herself in the operating agreement she'd co-signed 11 years earlier. Alongside it, a letter, also from Denise, that Rhonda had kept sealed in the firm's records, per Denise's instructions, to be opened only in the event of a leadership dispute following my death. Denise, ever the planner, ever 3 steps ahead of everybody, including her own son. I read it aloud myself. I owed her that. It wasn't long. Denise never wasted words. She wrote that she loved Marcus with everything in her, that she was proud of the man he'd worked to become, and that she also knew him, knew his impatience, his hunger to prove something, his tendency to reach for what he wanted before he'd earned it. She asked the board, if this letter was ever read, to remember that Walter built this company with his hands and his back before Marcus was born, and that any transition of leadership needed to happen with respect, not ambush. She asked Marcus, directly in her own handwriting reproduced in that letter, to be patient, to earn it the way I had. Nobody in that room said a word for almost a full minute. Marcus's face had gone grey, not angry anymore, hollowed out. He looked at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and I said, "I'm not firing you, Marcus. Your equity's real, your title's real, and you're still my son whether the law ever put that word on paper or not. But I built this. Your mother protected it. And you don't get to skip the line because you got impatient with your grief." Then I told the board that I was postponing all leadership discussions 90 days, that Grimes and Holloway would continue exactly as it had under my direction, and that if Marcus wanted to sit across from me like a grown man and talk about an actual succession plan, one built on years, not weeks, my door was open. I walked out of that boardroom without raising my voice once. Marcus came to my house that night, stood on my porch a long time before he knocked. I could see him through the window. When I opened the door, he didn't say sorry right away. He just said, "I miss her so bad, Walter. I didn't know what to do with it." And I understood. Because I missed her too, and grief makes fools of good men sometimes. We talked past midnight. Not about the company. About her. 3 months later, I did start transitioning leadership. Slowly, deliberately, the way Denise asked. Marcus is my chief operating officer now, learning the business from the ground the way I once did. Not handed a crown, but earning one. The board seat I nearly lost that Thursday is still mine, and will be until I decide on my own terms that it's time. Some people think revenge means burning things down. I've learned, at 63, that the truest kind is simpler than that. Sometimes it's just standing your ground, quietly, with the truth in your hand, and letting patience do what anger never could.